This story is called After the Game. Steven trudged past the opposing team's bus in the parking lot at Green Park. They were celebrating their late inning win over Leicestershire High when they saw him and really rubbed it in. He had made the fatal error that cost his team their freshman baseball game. The guys on the other team laughed at him and mocked his misplay as he hung his head low, bat and glove in hand for the long, lonely trek home. He would be kicking himself over his decision for some time. He fielded the ball cleanly and threw it wide to the catcher guarding home plate instead of it to first for the final out. The catcher couldn't sweep the ball down in time to tag the sliding runner, and it was over. Steven didn't bother calling his mom for a ride. It was already dusk after 11 innings of play, and he needed a long walk to cool down and sit with his disappointing performance. Just across the street, he slid into the cemetery for his usual shortcut home, leaving the busy park and taunting visitors behind. It was a quiet walk, one he often took to and from the field for practice and games. He usually enjoyed the slow saunter up the long hill through the forest and over the creek past the high school, and finally to his house in one of the nicer neighborhoods. Steven dwindled in front of familiar graves. He read the names, some of whom shared his last name, some with small pictures, daguerreotypes from a different era. It distracted him for minutes at a time until his thoughts returned to baseball and his poor performance. The sun was setting. He sat down in the grass among a less clustered patch of graves. He was a passable high school ball player, but was getting to the age where it was clear he wasn't going to be a pro or even college-level athlete. Rolling his bat in the grass, sitting next to a child's final resting place. Someone had left a plastic car from the newest Pixar movie for the kid, even though the boy had been dead 10 years. He was jostled out of his self-pity and wandering thoughts by an approaching form from a little way down the hill. The caretaker had seen Steven wander through enough. Other people jogged and walked Valleyview. Maybe it was late enough where he would get a warning. He noticed he had been tapping his bat against a small, flat grave marker. Steven didn't want to deal with an adult hassling him and stood up, ready to move on. He waved off the coming form and continued up the path so as to avoid confrontation. Steven thought it odd that he had not been warned or greeted. He turned and continued up the gentle incline, walking backwards a short way. He saw that it was an old man in a suit, only about 30 or so yards away. By now, it had become so dusky he couldn't make out much about him. "Sorry, I'm leaving right now." Steven hoped that was enough to get the guide to leave him alone. He turned back and quickened his pace. Not 10 seconds passed when he could hear the old man gaining on him, his labored shuffling. He was surprised the man could keep up. "Sir, I had a late game. I'll be out of here in a couple minutes." He didn't bother turning for a response and kept pumping his feet. He was getting worried that this old fellow might not be with the cemetery, but someone who had followed him in. Steven considered the possibility that his trailer was some sort of molester or abductor, but the thought didn't stick when he remembered he was a solid 6 feet and could really swing a bat. The man in the suit was now on his heels. He was getting back some of that adrenaline that had seeped out of him after the final play of the game and was ready to run. The man groaned behind him, and Steven practically jumped out of his cleats. He spun to confront the man. "Give me a break, dude. What's up?" The guy didn't respond and had a wild look on his face which generally frightened the team. He lunged at Steven, grabbing his jersey. Steven yelled and jumped back, releasing himself. He pushed the guy back with the edge of the bat, then ran off the path and into a maze of large headstones and mausoleums. Unfortunately, running through a cemetery near dark isn't the safest of options, and he soon tripped over a small flat grave marker and twisted his ankle enough to yelp in torment. He grabbed his glove and bat and jumped up to feel a sharp shooting pain radiating from his ankle through his leg and fell back down to the ground with a loud groan. "Ah, shit!" Steven sighed in a near whisper, clutching his hurt leg. He could hear the old man in the suit groaning and shuffling in his direction, so he crawled between 2 nearby mausoleums and hoped the creepy guy at dementia would forget he was chasing him. He hid in his cubbyhole, collecting himself for a few minutes before the man appeared and again lunged at him, grabbing at his jersey and knocking the cap off his head. He prodded and jabbed the man back, afraid to actually hurt the old guy who was obviously not all there. "Come on, man, leave me the hell alone. Don't make me actually hit you with this bat." Stephen thought of his own grandpa at Floral Nursing and Rehabilitation Center. He didn't even remember his own wife due to his advanced Alzheimer's. This senile guy pawing at him was probably somebody's grandpa. The out-of-control man in the suit eventually backed off from some of the harder jabs to the chest. Stephen was breathing heavy, waiting to hear the guy shuffling again. When 5 minutes passed, he got up on his now swollen ankle and used the bat as a crutch to begin limping out into the open. "God damn it!" The crazy old coot tackled him and tore at his jersey and pants, tossing the bat in his melee against the young man. Stephen screamed in abject fear of being a 6-foot-something 15-year-old cemetery rape victim abused by a groaning, wheezing octogenarian. The elderly man's head cleaved a foot above Stephen. Some blood spurted onto his cheek and neck as the man in the suit shuddered, then crumpled on top of the teen. Stephen recognized the Axeman instantly. "Jesus, what the hell is going on?" He practically screamed at the caretaker, shocked that he had just axed an old man in the head. The middle-aged grizzled cemetery employee wiped his axe and reached down to help Stephen to his feet. Stephen stood with some effort and was supported by the caretaker as he hobbled back down the hill toward the service shack. Stephen called his mom to come get him. He said he had fallen in the cemetery and sprained his ankle. "I can't believe you axed that old man in the head." The old man just looked at him funny and smirked. "Sorry, kid. I lost track of the guy. I usually get them in the ground before they start walking. There were a bunch of kids here earlier trying to desecrate Schwartz's tomb. Had a hell of a time rounding him up and kicking him out." Stephen just looked at him dumbfounded. 4 feet of dirt and sod is usually enough to keep them down. Stephen just looked at him dumbfounded. 4 feet of dirt and sod is usually enough to keep them down. I got distracted after his funeral and left him hanging and, You're telling me that guy was dead? The caretaker nodded. Stephen was in a state of disbelief. Everything after he left the ball field now seemed to take on an otherworldly quality. "Looks like your mom's here." A car pulled up in front of the small shack. Stephen stood with his bat and glove to leave, but paused in the doorway to thank the man. "Well, I'm glad you helped me out back there, whether that guy was living or dead, so thanks." "No problem. I should have gotten to him sooner or none of this would have happened. For whatever reason, it seems to be more of a common occurrence these days." The caretaker smiled and waved Stephen off, then stopped him as if he forgot to add something. "And kid, let's keep this between you and me." The caretaker winked at him, and he nodded in affirmative before slipping out the door and into his mom's car.